When authority meets accountability. It started on a Wednesday night just after 11 p.m. on the streets of Toledo, Ohio. Lieutenant Colonel Adrienne Wallace was driving home in her government-issued black SUV after wrapping up a base meeting 2 hours south. She wasn't speeding, wasn't swerving, just heading home after a long day. Sergeant Daniel Mercer, parked off Reynolds Road, was bored. The shift had been dragging with no action. When he spotted an unfamiliar vehicle, he pulled out behind her and hit the lights. Adrienne slowed down, calm and controlled, and pulled over. Mercer approached with his hand already on his holster. "License and registration," he said, no greeting. Adrienne kept her hands visible. "Officer, may I ask why I'm being stopped?" Mercer squinted, shining his flashlight directly into her face. "You were drifting between lanes, didn't signal. Looked like you might have been under the influence." "I wasn't." "License and registration," he repeated, louder this time. Adrienne moved slowly, deliberately. As she handed over her documents, she added, "That's a government vehicle. I'm a federal employee." Mercer glanced at the ID. "You military?" "Yes." He gave a small smirk. "Doesn't mean you're above the law." "I never said I was." His tone shifted, more aggressive. "Step out of the vehicle." "Excuse me." "I said step out. I'm conducting a sobriety check." "On what grounds?" "I've complied. I haven't been drinking." "Now you're refusing a lawful order." Mercer stepped closer and opened her door himself. "I need you to exit the vehicle now." That's when Adrienne calmly turned on her phone camera and hit record. "Just so we're clear, this interaction is being documented." Mercer's eyes flicked to the phone. A sliver of hesitation crossed his face, but he didn't back down. Adrienne stepped out, posture straight, not defiant but firm. Mercer proceeded with the field sobriety test. She passed perfectly. No slurring, no stumble, no hesitation. Still, he wrote her a citation for failure to maintain lane. Adrienne took the ticket without a word, just a look. She got back in her car and drove away. But Mercer had no idea that ticket would show back up in a courtroom. The complaint. Adrienne Wallace wasn't dramatic or confrontational, but after 22 years in uniform, 2 combat tours, and countless close calls, she'd had enough. This wasn't just about her. It was about every young soldier she mentored, every civilian mistreated without anyone to speak up, every woman who'd been forced to swallow their pride to avoid making things worse. Back at Fort Wayne, Indiana, Adrienne made her calls. First to JAG, then to the Inspector General's office. She attached the footage, filed the complaint, and let the facts stand on their own. Within days, the story circulated through military legal circles. Mercer's name was attached to an internal investigation, but he didn't believe it would go anywhere, not until the envelope hit his desk. It was a notice to appear. A formal civil rights complaint had been filed. The plaintiff, Lieutenant Colonel Adrienne Wallace. The charge, violation of constitutional rights, including unlawful detainment, intimidation, and abuse of authority. Mercer laughed it off at first. But his captain called him in, blinds pulled. "Dan, we need to talk." "About what?" "The lady from the other night. She's not just some random motorist. She's a lieutenant colonel, a combat veteran. Her record's spotless, her connections are deep, and she's got the whole thing on tape, from 2 angles. Yours and hers." Mercer scoffed. "So what? I didn't arrest her. I didn't touch her." "You were on edge, Dan. You escalated. You treated her like a suspect before you even knew who she was." For once, Mercer didn't have a snappy response. The courtroom. When the court date arrived, Adrienne walked in wearing her full-service uniform, badges, medals, rank clear as daylight. She wanted the jury to see her not just as a woman in a car that night, but as someone who had served her country, respected the law, and expected the same in return. Mercer was already seated. When he turned and saw the uniform, his smirk faltered. Adrienne took the stand with quiet discipline. "I was driving back from a meeting around 11:15, she testified. "I was pulled over by Officer Mercer. There was no erratic driving, no signs of intoxication. I was compliant. I asked reasonable questions." He responded with aggression. Then came the footage. First from her phone, then from his body cam. It showed everything. Mercer's tone, his posture, his hand hovering near his weapon even when she was fully cooperative. The unnecessary field test. The dismissive attitude when she passed. The jury didn't speak. They didn't need to. During cross-examination, the defense attorney asked, "Is it possible Officer Mercer was simply following protocol?" Adrian didn't blink. "No." "Is it possible he was concerned for safety?" "I was driving within the lines. I was sober. I was not aggressive. There was no safety concern." "And yet you recorded the stop." "Why?" "Because I've lived long enough to know that silence isn't protection. I wanted an accurate record of what happened." "So you don't believe officers should have discretion?" Adrian looked at him calmly. "I believe discretion must be paired with discipline. That badge isn't a free pass, it's a responsibility." When Mercer took the stand, the prosecutor asked, "Why did you ask her to exit the vehicle?" She looked evasive. "Did she disobey any commands?" "She questioned me." "Is that illegal?" Silence. "Sergeant Mercer, were you aware she was a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army?" "Not at the time. And if you had known?" Mercer's voice dropped. "I probably would have handled it differently." There it was, the truth. The verdict. 3 days later, the judge delivered the ruling. The jury has found in favor of the plaintiff. The court recognizes a violation of constitutional rights during an unlawful stop and detainment. Mercer was ordered to pay $35,000 in damages, and the decision would remain on permanent public record, forwarded to the Department of Justice and Toledo Police Department for review. Adrian didn't smile or celebrate. She just nodded once, to herself. She had done what she came to do. A week later, Mercer was placed on administrative leave. The shield that had once protected him was cracked. The lesson. 2 months later, Adrian stood before a room of young recruits at Fort Wayne. "How many of you think a uniform automatically earns you respect?" she asked. A few hands went up. "Respect isn't something you're owed, it's something you prove every day." Same goes for power. The badge, the rank, the authority, it's not a shield, it's a weight. And if you can't carry it with discipline, you don't deserve to carry it at all. She paused. "When I was stopped by an officer who forgot that truth, I didn't yell. I didn't panic. I didn't let it slide. I documented it. I filed. I showed up in court and told the truth. That officer thought his badge made him untouchable, until he saw my rank. Not just on my uniform, but in how I carried myself. That's the difference. That's leadership." She looked around the room. "Lead with character. Serve with integrity. And never forget, you don't just represent the uniform. You represent every person who came before you and everyone who will come after. Let this be a reminder. Authority without accountability is just a mask for weakness. Speak up, stand firm, and when you see wrong, don't turn away. Silence is comfort for the guilty, but courage is protection for the rest of us. Power that cannot be questioned rots from the inside. Real leadership survives scrutiny because it is built on responsibility, not fear. Progress has never come from obedience alone. It comes from people who are willing to challenge what feels wrong, even when it's uncomfortable or costly. Every injustice depends on bystanders to survive. When people choose ease over integrity, harm is given room to grow. Refusing to look away is not rebellion, it is duty. One voice can disrupt a pattern, and many voices can dismantle it entirely. Courage is not loudness or anger, it is consistency. It's the daily choice to tell the truth, to protect those with less power, and to hold the line when pressure demands silence. This is how trust is earned, communities are safeguarded, and the future is shaped. It shows up in steady actions long before anyone is watching, doing what is right when there is no applause and no guarantee of reward. It means accepting discomfort as the cost of integrity and choosing principle over convenience, again and again. Over time, this quiet resolve becomes a signal to others that fairness is not negotiable and that dignity is not conditional. Such resolve creates spaces where people feel safe to speak, to exist, and to grow. It sets standards that outlast moments and influences decisions far beyond the present. When resolve becomes habit, it turns values into structures and ideals into reality, laying foundations strong enough to carry generations forward.